Chapter 13. "You really want to watch a strip?" asked Bright. A ripple of laughter ran down the rank. The platoon stood at ease at the end of the firing range, feet apart and hands behind their backs, while Sergeant Adams paced to and fro in front of them. "Correct. Today isn't just about sending a few thousand rounds down the range. It's about me making sure you lot know what you're doing from the moment you pick up a weapon right through to when you hand it back in. No one is firing off a round till you've all stripped and rebuilt your weapon, and that goes for every single one you use today, from your SA-80 to the GPMG and your sidearm. Or if you prefer, we could spend the day doing PT. I really don't mind." He got out his watch. "So, platoon, take up your weapons and begin." At that, the platoon dropped to the ground to sit cross-legged or on their knees, and everyone got on with pulling apart the SA-80 in their laps. Undo the clips on the stock and remove the firing mechanism. Remove the spring, cocking handle and bolt. Click, click, snap, click. Unlatch the handguard over the barrel. Remove the gas adjuster. There was a soothing rhythm to the lightly oiled, precision-engineered pieces of metal sliding together exactly as designed. Not too much force, not too little, and the gun responded in your hands like a trained pet. Didn't take long for Sean to have his weapon in pieces and laid out on the cloth in front of him. Muzzle, flash eliminator, trigger, trigger housing. He was grateful to be focusing on something he could do with ease. It was Tuesday, and his weekend was long behind him, though not long enough. Sorting his mum out, scrap with a loan shark, and twocking a car were all things that hadn't been on his to-do list. Yet done them he had, and somehow got away with it all. Copper had come through for him too, shifting the car within hours. Minus his commission, he had handed Sean a good roll of notes. 500 quid, most of which Sean had then had to hand straight back. Protection money for his own mum. No, he kept reminding himself, not protection money, just his dues. Sean had made a contribution to the guys so that it would still be worth their while to keep an eye on her. That was okay, wasn't it? But he couldn't keep popping up to town and supplying Copper with a car whenever funds were low. And he had to keep the guys settled somehow. His idea of getting his mum off the estate had evaporated in the cold, sober light of day, the moment he checked his bank balance. He had met guys who weren't paid much more than him, but had 30 or 40 grand put away. A couple of tours in Afghanistan, with nothing to spend your dosh on, would do that for you. But he had yet to earn a full year's salary off the army, and while his income was way higher than his expenditure on single living accommodation, his balance would take one look at a London rent and vanish. If the soppy cow was going to be looked after full-time, he needed a more steady way of paying his dues, and his regular salary was never going to be enough. Adams checked the platoon's work and announced himself satisfied. They moved on to the range proper and stood on the firing line. Sean clamped the ear defenders to his head, though not yet fully over his ears so that he could hear the sergeant's orders. In front of him, stretching out from approximately 50 metres to a maximum range of 300 metres, were a number of Figure 2 targets attached to plywood boards. Man-sized images showing a helmeted soldier charging towards you with a bayonet fixed. The end of the range was marked by a huge steep bank of soil covered in patches of grass and weeds. "Best part of the job, this." It was Heaton, standing alongside him. Sean nodded in agreement, with a big grin. Legally firing off guns was the next best thing to driving a fast car. And what had Heaton said in the car? Could always use a little help. That sounded a lot like an offer. How serious had it been? He gave the corporal a sideways glance and wondered if now was a moment to bring it up. But then the order came through from Sergeant Adams to prepare to fire. Sean was in standing position, his weight already forward on his left foot, ready to fire. He pulled his weapon up and into the shoulder, staring down through the ACOG which drew the targets in close and clear. "Single shots, in your own time," Adams said. "Have it, then." Sean squeezed the trigger. The crack of the round was followed by the thump of it slamming home downranged. He fired off single shots, lowering his weapon between each one to adjust his aim and stop his arms fatiguing, breathing, staying calm. He knew why they were on single shots rather than the usual 3-round bursts. This was all about nailing their accuracy and marksmanship. And fully automatic was, as every soldier knew, a last resort. If you were down to that, odds were that things had really gone to shit. For the rest of the day, the platoon cycled through a range of weaponry, honing their skills so that they could use each gun efficiently and with deadly accuracy. Last item of the day was their Glock pistols, firing 9mm rounds down range, which made Sean think of Heaton again. He took up the position, feet apart, hands together on the grip, sighting along the barrel at the target, a black silhouette of an attacking soldier. And he couldn't help thinking back just a few days to when he had been sighting like this for real, on a cowering, pimply loan shark he had just beaten up. How many of the lads around him could say the same? His lips curled into a grim smile and he opened fire. Steady shots, relaxing into the kick from the weapon, adjusting his aim each time to ensure accuracy. Despite what you saw in the movies, hitting anything accurately with a pistol at a distance beyond 20 meters was not easy. In fact, it was basically a miracle. But that wasn't what these weapons were designed for. They were for close-quarter combat, and that meant around 5 meters or less, or as backup, which meant that everything had gone to shit even more than putting your rifle on fully automatic. The Glock was your last resort. Eventually, the day came to an end, and Sergeant Adams gathered everyone around him. "Not bad," he said. "Not brilliant, but not bad. I'll be putting in for a few more days like this. Can't have you lot becoming slack with your marksmanship. Check your weapons and piss off. Harker, you have the lovely job of helping Corporal Heaton clear up and sign this lot back in." There were worse jobs. After a day on the range, while everyone else was hitting the pub, someone always had to spend a while checking the area for any live rounds, clearing up, then lugging stuff back to the quartermaster department. They all ended up doing it at some point. Today was Sean's turn. As the rest of the section piled into the back of a Land Rover Wolf, he stood there with Heaton. "Done this before?" "No. Doesn't take long," the corporal said. "All the weapons were already checked through and clear, so we just need to load those up, bag up the brass," he meant the expended rounds, "check the area, and we're done." "What about the rounds left over?" Sean asked. No problem. I'll deal with them. You get the weapons sorted, right?" Sean nodded. For the next half hour, loaded up the SA-80s, sidearms and the GPMG into the Wolf. Finally, Heaton came over. "Done?" "All in and accounted for. You?" The corporal nodded. He had stacked up the ammo crates that had accompanied them for the day on the range. "I'll give you a hand," Sean offered. "No need," he said. "You can drive." Something else the Army had done for Sean was getting through his driving test. His HGV licence was the next target on the radar. He went round to the driver's door and clambered in. A couple of minutes later, Heaton got in beside him. Sean sparked the engine into life and spun the Wolf round to head off back to barracks. "Your mate Clark was on good form today," Heaton said. "Nice to see a woman can aim and fire at the same time." Sean bit his lip, and several angry responses ran through his mind, but he'd had practice in this kind of thing with Copper. You didn't get offended by Copper being a jerk, just like you didn't blame a dog for yapping. It was what they did. So all he did was mutter, "Leave it out." They drove in silence for a few moments. "Good weekend, then?" Heaton asked. Sean grunted. "I've had better." He subconsciously flexed the fingers of his right hand again. Shit, they were stiff. Split skin had scabbed over and the bruises were fading, but it had never taken that long before. He really must have pounded that bastard Ricky. Heaton saw the movement, then leaned closer. He whistled. "Okay, so things kind of went downhill after Friday. What was that? Bust up for old time's sake?" "Something like that." Sean was happy to let Heaton think whatever he wanted. Telling an NCO he'd stolen a car was probably not his best plan, especially not when he wanted to get into the NCO's good books. He took a breath to raise the subject of extra work, but Heaton got in first. "Do you miss it?" "What, London? Nah, not at all, really." "That's not what I meant," Heaton said. "Your old mates, All that. The lifestyle. Sean shook his head. Not very convincing, Heaton noted. Lifestyle got me banged up, Sean said. Never again. He wasn't sure what else he could say. He didn't miss it, but at the same time there was no question about it. Grabbing the car had felt good. It had scratched an itch he hadn't known he'd had, and it meant his mum was safe. And then there was still the issue of money. He began. Heaton looked at him expectantly as he pulled the wolf off the ranger's track and onto a metalled road. Sean looked straight ahead. I could really do with some extra cash, like you were saying. Heaton glanced sideways at him. Oh, yeah? Yeah, it's just that... Sean paused, bit his lip. Heaton didn't need to know why he needed the money, and he wasn't going to start blurting out his mum's problems. Yeah, stuff at home, it'd come in handy. For the next few minutes neither spoke. Sean drove on, his right arm resting out of the open window, his left making sure the wolf stayed in a straight line. Heaton cut the silence. I think I can help you out there. Yeah? Yeah, it's easy work. Just delivering stuff for me, that's all. Would give me time on some other projects. Cash in hand, and we'll split anything I use you for 60-40. How's that sound? Sounds sweet, Sean said. What's the money like? Oh, it depends, Heaton told him. 60-40 would get you a few hundred extra a month, say $500,000. Sean glanced at him. Alarm bells were going off in his head. For delivering stuff? What stuff? Supplies, Heaton said. Sean kept looking at him and he shrugged. Reassigned stuff we get for free, but he gave a laugh. Some freaks will pay big time for it, and... Oh, you're about to hit that lamppost. Sean looked back at the road, just in time to pull the wolf back within the white lines. You mean you steal from the quartermaster? Are you fucking mental? The last thing he needed was to get nabbed by the army and thrown back inside, this time in a military prison. I said reassigned, said Heaton. Damaged, out-of-date kit. The MOD doesn't want it. They'd only destroy it. I just cover it with a bit of paperwork and it's done. Anything from a sleeping bag and a stove to ration packs and magazines. I just siphon it off. Sleeping bags, Sean said sceptically. He thought back to Heaton's flat. It would take a lot of hooky sleeping bags to pay for that. But he had learnt long ago not to ask too much unless you knew for a fact that you would like the answer. What you didn't know couldn't implicate you. And he really needed some way of earning more money. Heaton laughed. OK, let's just say what the MOD doesn't need, I make use of, and leave it at that. It's in the strange grey area between black market and eBay, so you free Saturday evening? I got a new contact placed an order. Small delivery to sound me out. Potential to go mega. Sean looked stonily at the road ahead. The gatehouse was approaching and he shifted down a gear. To tell the truth, Saturday night he'd been kind of hoping to hit the town with some of the lads from the platoon. Beer, dancing, and a distinct possibility of pulling. But 500 quid for a few nights' work was 500 quid more than he would get any other way. And he might be back in time for the night out. Sure, he said. Saturday.